Hello, Wade loves you. Won't you tell Wade your name? This is Wade, and you are in Wade World. If you saw the last video, Wade explained how all of the billionaires today in the world are basically billionaires because of your money, your taxes, which led to the government spending your money into their business and their businesses being valued so highly, which made them billionaires. Now, if you're in this world today and you're feeling lost, like you have no control, you can especially see this in the case now of Charlie Kirk's assassination, where Candace Owens is doing an investigation. And yesterday, his widow, who that girl ain't right. It's the eyes. You can never hide the eyes, right? There's something wrong there. If you feel like you're living in a psyop, you lost control, it's because that control has been taken from you. Now, again, yesterday we mentioned SpaceX. So SpaceX has gotten an $800 billion valuation without ever IPOing, which has made Elon Musk richer than everybody else. Now, the dude has good ideas, that's fine. But this is the system that is also putting people, individuals at the top, and putting you at the bottom, and basically putting them at a higher top and digging you into a deeper hole. Now, in case you didn't know, the biggest shareholder in Tesla is BlackRock. I'm pretty sure they're also involved in SpaceX. And if we look at the story of how SpaceX got this insane valuation, you will see that they were almost broke around 2010. And they were rescued by a $1.5 billion government contract. So, from being almost worth nothing in 2010 to $800 billion, they were saved by a government contract. The government paid them. That means you invested in SpaceX. Because of that contract, the valuations occur. You know why it's $800 billion? Because the people investing, they know that the government, your tax dollars, are always going to pay. So they're like, this is a safe investment. But if your tax dollars are the reason these companies are valued so highly, for example, bet you didn't know Google became successful because the CIA, again, the government, invested in it. Facebook became mega successful because, again, the government, CIA, NSA, invested in it. So this is your money, your tax dollars being invested, but you don't get any dividends. You just get taxed more and more and just get given, here's a little Starbucks coffee, and look how rich this guy has become, while you slave away and become poorer. So if in 2010, SpaceX was almost bankrupt, and the only thing that saved it was the government injection of $1.5 billion, then what percentage of SpaceX's success depended on that? Is it 100%? Is it 98%? Is it 90%? Because if that's the case, and that is the reason for the valuation, then 90% of this company belongs to the people, to the American people, who paid taxes and whose taxes were used to get this company out of bankruptcy. So right now, a lot of you would be millionaires, a lot of you, because 90% of 800 is $720 billion. Now, how would the system even work, you say? There are people who pay different amounts of taxes. And this is a good question. Because we have come up with a trustless, decentralized technologies like blockchain. Blockchain is the perfect example of how to put governments and their reward systems in a system that doesn't require trusting the government. For example, it also builds wealth via tokens. That's the example Wade is going to give. For example, let us suppose your family has been, and we're going to take the case of America because America is a young country, everybody understands the US. So let's suppose your family has been in the country since the founding of the country. So let's say the 1500s. Since then, they've paid sales tax, they've paid these taxes, those taxes. They didn't have the technology back then. That's fine. 1930, the central bank, Federal Reserve was established and they instituted mandatory income tax. They have the records, right? So instead of you just paying the government tax, if there was a system where you paid the government some tax, then that tax revenue that you paid was weighted against all the tax revenue from everybody else, and everybody else's contribution was a percentage of the tax revenue. For example, if the tax revenue of the United States for the last year was $1 trillion, just as an example, it probably was slightly more, and you paid $1,000 of that. But this doesn't just include income tax, this includes state income tax. If you don't have state income tax, that's fine. Federal income tax, sales tax, registration of vehicles, insurance, basically everything that the government forces you to pay extra out of your income instead of having just a simple transaction between two people is a tax. So let's suppose in the last year you paid X amount of state income tax, X amount of federal income tax, X amount of sales tax, X amounts of registration fees, X amounts of this, social security, this and that, whatever. So that would be weighted against the total income tax, total amount of tax revenue received by the government. So let's suppose out of $1 trillion you paid in total $10,000. So that would be 10,000 divided by a trillion, whatever percentage that is, right? So 10,000 divided by a trillion, that's 1,000 million, 1,000 billion, right? So that's 10 divided by a billion. That's going to be, 8 zeros and 1%, something like that. So you would get in a fair system that percentage as a representative, let's say a tax token, back into your, let's say, wallet or account. Now, the good thing in that is that the tax tokens can be passed down to family. So all of your family's hard work from your great, 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 great grandfather all the way to you is counted. And that gives you the validity to stake claim to anything that the government spends your money on, right? So if we just do the math, right? If you own 0 to 801% of everything the government invests in, there's not just Tesla and SpaceX, it's Google, it's Oracle, it's OpenAI, it's defense contracting, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Navy ships, everything, infrastructure. So you are actually going to be a very wealthy person because you are going to get dividends from this tax token as the valuations of these companies increase. Now, how will this affect the current rich class of billionaires? Here's the thing. WAYDE is super pro innovators. If you come up with an idea that changes the world, fantastic, you're doing good for mankind. But let's be honest. If your idea and your will was enough, then you should not have had to raise any money at all, and see how far that would take you. And that means no private equity, no equity selling before IPO. That means just no. It's just you, your money, and the money you earn from business going back into the business. A lot of billionaires would immediately drop down to single or double-digit millionaires. This is the brutal fact. Secondly, let's be absolutely fair, right? If the infusion of cash that a lot of you mega billionaires, almost all of you are mega billionaires because of government contracts, and there's nothing wrong with the system, by the way, it's fine. But if that's responsible for 90 to 95% of the value of your company and your value, then that's not balanced. Because that means that on your own, you are responsible. Of course, you're responsible for the idea and the willpower, but ideas and willpower don't get you anywhere without funding. And if the funding and the funding sources are because of the government investing in you, that makes a huge difference. You would only be worth 5% or 2%, sometimes 0%, because some of you didn't do anything. You just got handed it, right? Because of your nepotism and the people you know in your tribe. Now, 5% or 2% of many billionaires. 200 billion, $600 billion. That's like 4 billion, $12 billion. More realistic. However, because a vast majority, a lot of your value comes from the government spending the people's money. Now, you as the people with your tax tokens, that other hundreds of billions of dollars get distributed down to you. This is a balanced and a fair society where people cooperate. Cooperation with each other is something that they look forward to. They have a system. You have a system where if you believe in something, you can definitely urge the people that you've elected to rule over you to invest in it. Also, this gives you a system where when they take decisions to invest that do not require your input or they don't want your input, you still get the rewards of it. However, power imbalance definitely comes from violence. So that's something that has to be dealt with. So, how would these tax tokens make you richer than the richest people in the world? This is very simple. We'll take the example of a freshly arrived immigrant. Now, Elon Musk is an African American, like a true African American because he is from South Africa. This is the first generation immigrant, and America and the system America has set up has made him the richest man in the world so far. Now, if your family has been living in this nation for 400 years and you are not anywhere at the level of this guy who just popped up for the first time, is that fair to all the blood, sweat, and tears that your family sacrificed to be here? Not taking nothing away from people like him and other people who become billionaires due to their understanding of the system and using the system. That's fine. We're not blaming them for using the system, but we're questioning the system itself. Now, if your answer is that it is unfair, then that is fair. Because if you have built the entire infrastructure in the entire nation and your family has built it and sacrificed it, not just in money, but actually in death, in life, in blood, in tears and sweat, then you definitely have a bigger hand to play in setting up the stage that allows these people to be successful, right? These tax token systems would count that as a part of your contribution. Moreover, you can say thirdly, because you've already gone through percentage, tax tokens, and now you come to history. Thirdly, as your family contributes, because if you are going to live in a society where you are taxed, then you have to have a system where you're like, all right, if you are going to tax us, we want our return on the investment because you're basically just taking money from us and giving us nothing. You're taking money from us. The tax system is basically taking money from you at the edge of a sword on the threat of violence against you, on the threat of incarceration against you. So it's forced money taking. Give us the money and don't ask what we're going to do with it. And no, building schools and infrastructure, private people did it way before we had income tax in America and everywhere else in the world. That's BS. A lot of these things are spent making people who rule you great. Like democracy is the best way to loot people, honestly. This kind of democracy is the best way to loot people and make them poor. So, historically, now you would accrue tax tokens, which your family has accrued over generations. Now you could say, but what if there was a market for tax tokens? That's pretty simple. Tax tokens, to be absolutely fair, need to be fixed in that once they are sent and associated with a certain ID, they can't be moved. They can only be associated with another ID that is a blood relative of the person who earned it. So their family wealth keeps increasing. Your tax tokens and tax accounts keep accruing. This is my great-grandfathers, my great-great-grandfathers, my father's, mine, my sons, and my grandsons, etc., etc. Right, so they will all have access to an increasing number of tax tokens through various accounts. But you can't move it. So how do you make money from it? Very simple. It's in a blockchain decentralized system. If you have X number of tax tokens, The government invests, so far, the government has invested at a minimum $38 billion in Tesla and SpaceX, which has made both companies worth about combined 2 trillion. That would mean that those tax tokens would be a percentage of the total tax revenue that you have paid every year. Out of the total tax revenue, if $38 billion has been invested in these companies, then you take a percentage of the total tax revenue that you paid and divide it by 38 billion, right? Then you also weigh how much the investment from your tax dollars helped the valuation grow. Let's say it's 90%. So 90% of the company basically belongs to the people. And as these companies grow in value, you get dividends. You get, again, money sent to you by the government to those accounts that can be used by you. This eliminates a lot of very simple people getting shafted because they don't understand the system, so they'll probably trade their tax tokens in bad times and sell them for pennies on the dollar, which means basically sell them for a penny when it's worth $1 to other people, and again, we'll have the same imbalance. So they have to be made non-tradable. They can only be inherited, and they have to be, once they're sent to your bank, a tax account, tax wallet, they're fixed there, can't be moved. This has to be a feature. Now imagine a world like that, right? In this world, all of the American government is taking all of the tax dollars that you loan it. And again, your biggest competitor in this world would be private central banks. And you would pay a lot more attention because you'd be like, all right, my tax dollars are buying the American government debt. Who else is my competitor? It's central banks. Who controls the central banks? Oh, it's not the government. Who are these private people? You would be a lot more interested because they're basically eating into your income. You'll also be interested in your government selling its debt overseas to other governments. Be like, why are these people getting? And your government could be like, yeah, we're not going to spend your tax dollars. We're just going to spend these people. We're just going to depend solely on the central bank and foreign government. So basically, the government is disloyal to you. It makes you a lot more interested in what actually is your financial system, in that your government doesn't have loyalty to you, but to a bunch of private central bankers and international governments who have no loyalty to you. They don't care about you. They're not of your race, of your blood, of your tribe, right? So, in this system, because of all of the blood and sweat and tears of your ancestors and of your children that is accruing every time the government makes an investment, for example, $38 billion at a minimum in SpaceX and Tesla, and then those investments blow up to be $2 trillion companies, both of them combined, you would reap a reward. 90% of the success of those companies, if it comes from your tax dollars, and your tax dollars are the reason that other people are also investing in it. And again, how did they become successful? Was it your tax dollars? So you have a stake in other people also. It's like an insanely productive, positive, good feedback loop. So basically, you get to a universal income, but that is income that you have actually earned. Not just trust me, bro, I'm going to give you money, which a lot of these people are like, oh, I'm going to give you money. Yeah, if you are taking all the money that my tax dollars spent were taken from me, right? If you're taking that money and becoming a billionaire or trillionaire, and then saying, oh, trust me, bro, I'll give you $1,000 a month as a universal basic income, I think it's fair. That's bullshit, because your outlay should be not $1,000 a month, but over generations, some of people probably deserve $1 million a month. You're going to come to me and say, hey, bro, I know you deserve $1 million a month, but here's $1,000, so shut up. Universal basic income, right? At least you're not homeless. This would also give you more power because it would eliminate lobbying, which is the biggest corrupt practice in politics. There's corruption at a small level, and there's corruption for wealthy people, which is lobbying. You can buy politicians, you can lobby them. APAC is a good example of what lobbying can get you. So you could literally make sure that people like BlackRock cannot buy residential housing. People like BlackRock cannot buy residential housing. That means corporations cannot buy residential housing. That means housing goes down. That means you can buy a house. If you look at the graph of yearly salary and income versus house cost, It has gone ridiculous since the 1960s after JFK was shot. Before that, believe it or not, in America, you earned more in an year than a house was worth. So a house was worth $4,644. You could earn 5,200. So you could buy a house within a year of having a job. And while earning, living, enjoying life, eating, you could buy a house. And if you really wanted to splurge out, you could buy a house with 2 years of saved income, and a really big house with 2 years, and a gigantic house with 3 years of saved income. Now, imagine trying to buy a house with 1 year of saved income, right? It's because you have no power. Your power, your labor, your wealth is being stolen from you, and other people are being made rich while you sit there getting poorer and poorer, drugged up, distracted by degeneracy, drinking, being fed absolute goy slop and fed slop about how the world works. And a lot of you lack the willpower, honestly. So this also requires the people to have willpower because remember, a fair and balanced and just system requires a tremendous amount of willpower from the grassroots because once the leader is gone, humanity reverts to being unfair, imbalanced, and unjust. Injustice, right? So, in a tax token system, your wealth keeps increasing. You get a basic income because of your past works, and that income grows if you keep working even more. The harder you work, the more your income grows. You have control over where the government's, the people you elected is basically the government, it's not a machine, it's people. You have control over where they spend your money, where they spend your money. You have control over who else they're trying to raise money from, and you have the power to nix that. You also have the power to dictate where the government should be investing. And you also have the power to make sure that as time progresses, you don't get poorer, but as your country prospers, you prosper. Now, a great example of this we keep going back to in earlier times were monarchies, but even today there are monarchies. And there's a great debate about Muslim countries are so much better. Why is everybody coming to Christian countries? It's a racial thing. It's a racial thing between brown and whites. But if we look at the wealthiest countries in the world, where the people, the actual average people are wealthy, of the top 10, top 5 or 6 are all Muslim. Saudi Arabia, Brunei, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar. This is hilarious. Like the country that you're like, oh, everybody wants to come to this country. Yes, America is the great country. Police officers are driving Fords. Saudi Arabia police officers are driving Ferraris. And not only just any Ferraris, limited edition Ferraris. The average Saudi Arabian has a higher quality of life than the average American. This is no doubt about it. Why? Because the country owns its resources through its monarch, and the monarchy is just towards its own people. Also, it is almost impossible to become a Saudi Arabian citizen because they don't sell their citizenship. It's about blood. You have to have blood, Saudi Arabian blood, and not just any kind of blood. Very specific system there. That's just one example. Brunei is another example. There are people living now under monarchies, almost exclusively in Islamic monarchies, that are wealthier, way richer, and have a way higher standard of life. And they have good families, and they have children, and they have loving parents and siblings and everybody, and houses, and all creature comforts. And they're happier than almost every single country that is white and Christian. This is just a fact. That is an example of when a government, the monarch, is actually helping the people. And that monarch is helping the people out of the goodness of their heart. It's not solidified in code like the tax token system. But the tax token system basically takes power away from those who would steal from you and corrupt you and puts it back in your hands. If the wealth of the country is decentralized among its inhabitants, the power of the country is decentralized among its inhabitants, then that country is going to be, by its very nature of decentralization, powerful at a grassroots level. Right? So, in this future, you, by working hard and by contributing, Again, if you have to live under a tax system, this has to be the most fair way to live under it. Like if you are going to be extorted, you should have a say in it. Otherwise, you just devolve to being what the government is now, a glorified mafia with no blood ties or no loyalty to you, right? So if you have to live under a tax system, this is the most fair and just and balanced system you could live under. That every time you pay tax, all of your taxes are combined, taken as a percentage of the total tax revenue. Then you get tokens representing what you did that year throughout your lifetime, throughout your parents, grandparents, great grandparents, your children, grandchildren, great grandchildren's lifetimes, and they accrue. They accrue in the family. And as your elected officials spend government funds making private enterprise more and more successful, that private enterprise gives back to you because it's a private and public enterprise. All the fairest governments in the world have worked like this and will work like this. It helps gifted people come up with ideas and get funding and become successful, and it helps the people helping them become successful. In this world, gifted people would still be billionaires. They just wouldn't be 100, 200, 300 billionaires. They wouldn't be a trillionaire. They would still have 2, 4, 5, 10 billion dollars. But all of the rest of the funds that is being attributed to them would be distributed to you. Maybe you'll have an extra $1,000. Maybe you'll have an extra $2,000, $3,000. Maybe from one company 1,000, another company of 500. But let us suppose you get even $100 from each company as a tax-paying person. Do you know how many companies there are in the United States? If we say 80,000 profitable companies, that's $8 million a year at the very minimum, closer to maybe $50 million a year that you would get without having to work extra, just based on the work that you have done, the work your ancestors have done. Now you could keep working and that 8 million could balloon to 12 million, 12 million to 50, 50 to 60. And that's fine, but it gives you the value and the wealth that you actually deserve, and that has been taken from you and redistributed to a few people at the top. And you don't have to focus on individuals. There are other investors in SpaceX and Tesla and Google and Facebook and Alphabet. There are multiple other investors who are also taking this wealth from you. And again, if you're one of these investors, it's the way the system works. You're smart. You're using it. All right, good for you. But you have to understand that this is not a criticism of you. This is a criticism of the system. Once the system is fixed, of course, you're going to have something to say with it, about it, right? Because if you go from being Larry Ellison, who's worth God knows why, because he's Jewish, he's worth $200 billion. If you go from being worth $200 billion to $2 billion, you'll have something to say about it, right? Because at that level, you can actually enforce your will on multinational governments, right? But that would lead to a more balanced world. That would lead to a more just world. That would lead to a world where your success would be commensurate with your ability and your effort, right? The best way to look at it is if we really trace back what true genius is. Elon Musk has named his company Tesla. Elon Musk is a very smart guy. He's not a genius. You know who was a genius? Nikola Tesla. You know what he did for mankind? He was willing to give away a lot of his knowledge for free because it benefited mankind. People at that level, true geniuses, don't really ask for wealth. They just want to see the progress of mankind, the benefit of mankind. Tesla died penniless because most of his banker backers backed off when he showed them projects, for example, at Colorado Springs that could transmit wireless electricity from America to Europe very cheaply, almost freely, so no energy problems at all. But he never stopped inventing, he never stopped theorizing, even though he died penniless. So you live in a world where the man who actually made the technology that made Elon Musk and all these BlackRock and other people billionaires, the man who actually made the technology died penniless and ignored by everybody for being selfless, Whereas people who are now using this technology and your tax dollars are becoming billionaires and trillionaires. The injustice of this gives rise to solutions like this. The injustice of this gives rise to WAYDEs who understand that this is an imbalanced world. If you look at somebody's success and your emotion is going to be negative, even if that person is positive, that doesn't mean that person is evil. That means there is something massively wrong with the system. Right now, a lot of you probably read about these people becoming billionaires, this guy becoming a trillionaire. And you're like, yeah, my life isn't getting better. Good for him. My life isn't getting better. It's because that wealth has been stolen from you, transferred to them, and used to value them even higher. Now, if they do good things, great. But for every one of them doing good things, there's 1,000 of them not doing good things, utterly selfish. Right? Now, how would you feel if these people, for example, if we come back to this, if instead of being worth $500 billion, this guy was worth $5 billion. But you were also worth $1 billion more or more. Because your parents and grandparents and great grandparents and you, and then your children and grandchildren, great grandchildren, and great great grandchildren, great great grandparents, your entire life's labor gives you dividends that allows you to partake in the profits of all of these private enterprises that the government invests in. Wouldn't you feel better? Wouldn't you feel a lot better? You would probably be richer than Bill Gates and Larry Ellison and Elon Musk because you are being rewarded for generationally working hard. And again, if you became lazy and thought, I'll just live off my tax credits, you'll obviously fall behind. So there's always an element of competition in there. But you would be richer than Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg, because you and your taxes have made these people successful. So if you are 90% or 95% of the reason of their success, you would be wealthier than them. And if you're wealthier or even wealthy enough, you can be glad, like, oh, I'm happy that he's made money. That's good. My tax dollars helped make that happen, and I also benefited from him. If everybody is benefiting, very few people complain. But when nobody benefits in the present system, this looting system, the complaints grow louder and louder. And there's only two futures here. When democracy reaches, as Plato said, democracy is the final step before tyranny. When democracy reaches this point, where it always does, because it always comes with central banking and income taxation, when people see this disparate success to very few and their lives getting worse, then it only leads to two things. Either they revolt and set up a better and just system, or they get genocided. So in your future, whether you choose to or not, you only have two choices. Either you're going to be genocided and made into slaves, genocided or made into slaves, or you can change the system and become mega successful by having a stake in your nation. This requires willpower. Those with willpower understand it, those with willpower do not. And if you don't ask, you will not receive. So you have to ask for this. Remember, people in power will not give you what you require until you ask for it, and not peacefully. You have to ask for it in the same language that they tell you what they're going to do, because their language is backed by force and violence. So if you ask peacefully, it's not going to do anything. If the government comes to arrest you, it doesn't peacefully say, hey, could you please come with us and go to jail? They're like, hey, put your hands up, put your hands behind your back, you're going to jail, we're going to incarcerate you. You have to meet those who rule you at the same level. It enforces balance, it enforces fairness. Understand, if you don't ask for it, the system will never, ever occur. And then you have nobody to blame but yourself. Until next time, remember, you could be richer than the richest man in the world. So keep it cool, keep it cerebral and smart. And as always in WAYDE world, enjoy.